Hello. Yeah, okay. This will be my latest response to Sergeant Willie Pete. Now, you claim that I don't have a counter argument, and that with that long ass video that you just made, that you got nothing more to say to me. Wrong. Okay? Because there's a multitude of complexities that I have to get through and why you're wrong on a lot of these things. First of all, let's get something straight. I don't believe in the African people being the first people. Okay, Indigenous Australian people are the first people in the world. There's rock art of us with giant mammals that are supposed to have died off millions of years ago, and in our Dreamtime stories, it said we were created in time immemorial, which means we were here at the beginning of creation, along with those dinosaurs and giant mammals and all that. So, not to mention that the Bantu people, they came from North and West Africa. Before them, there was the bush people in the pygmies in the central part of Africa and the bushmen in the southern part of Africa, who were lighter skinned. They were there before those darker skinned blackfellas got to the rest of Africa and that. Now, yeah, the Melanesians, they have African features, but Indian people in India, they are closely related to Indigenous Australians. So that's one thing that I want to get off there. Also, that's bullshit about Tariq Nasheed's Hidden Colours video about somebody saying the Hawaiians knew about Africa and they're going to go to Africa to get reinforcements. How are they going to get there? How? They're literally on the other side of the world. They've got to go through all these other places just to get there? Like, nah, man, like, that's some bullshit, man. If you believe that, you're an idiot, man. Like, seriously. So, yeah, okay. And my people, we did have different languages, but we were able to communicate. I mean, we fucking lived here for millions of years. So we were able to communicate with each other and that because we, had to get married off with your neighbouring tribe and that so you don't inbreed, So we know how to communicate because we get one of the mixed children and that to speak the different languages back and forth to each other and that. So we knew how to communicate, and we did get on code when the white supremacists got here. Like I said in my other video, I said that we were using guerrilla warfare, and that eventually the white people used smallpox, and they knew that worked because they knew how it worked on the Native Americans before they came out here to Australia. That's the only reason why they won. So, yeah, it's, yeah, okay. So, what else do I want to go through? Yeah, okay. Okay, well, you made a long-ass video where you tried to say all this stuff about empires being the answer, like if one African empire would have been, the answer and all that. No, I don't think so. Because, like, you got to understand that that's not how things worked for Indigenous people. We didn't do that like that. So our histories are not comparative, and therefore, that was never going to eventuate. And you keep saying, without a culture, because you don't have a culture, but Indigenous people have a culture, you keep saying that we're just supposed to drop it all and fight the common enemy. And I understand, that's perfectly understandable, but then who determines how that's done? How does that work? And you keep saying about the white people getting on code. Let me tell you the origins of white supremacy. The origins of white supremacy came after you had the Mongolians coming in, conquering the fuck out of them, who looked differently, who spoke differently, dark-skinned Asian people. Then you had the Turks, who looked and spoke differently, coming into Eastern Europe, ravaging that. And then, and before all that, you had the blackfellas and Moors coming through Spain and Portugal and that. So when they got bombarded with these non-European people and that, they thought, okay, well, something else is going on here. We need to go and venture the world and kill off all these other people. Because don't forget, they had a warmongering mindset because they were used to warmongering with each other, so they seem to think that we think the same as them when we don't. So they went around the world trying to kill off everybody and that. And because of a lot of places that they went to, they seemed to think that they were superior because a lot of the people that they came across, didn't do the same things that they did, even though they got the all of that from the blackfellas in Africa and that. But they thought, okay, well, we're just going to destroy everyone's culture and rewrite history like they did in 1913. And yeah, we're just going to keep white supremacy going with that. So, I mean, like, yeah, you got to understand histories are not comparative. And yeah, that's how the origins of white supremacy. So it was more like a fear tactic, as well as, you know, a conquest. A fearful reaction. Sorry, to what was going on with those three different peoples coming into Europe and that. And it was also a conquest ambition. You know, getting all resources and that because Europe was overpopulated and all that. Yeah, so no, empires would not have been the answer. What else? You know, and not to mention, you know, there were African people that did fend off the Europeans. I mean, look at the Black Lions. Do research on them. The Ethiopians. Nearly 10 million of them died fending off the fucking Italians in Ethiopia. You know, look at how many of the Congolese people died when the Belgians were in there, but they were still able to, you know, be in there and you know, survive. And now you've got millions of people in the Congo now. So, you know, there was that, you know. What else here? You know, look at the blackfellas, how they were able to, you know, slaughter a lot of the Europeans when they tried to take over South Africa and that. You know, they were on code. You know. So, yeah, what else? Okay. You know, and yeah, and what else here? Like Tariq Nasheed was basically pointing out, you know, like white supremacy is now covert and not overt after the 60s, you know, when the civil rights movement and all that, because they thought, okay, well, let's be covert with it, not overt with it. And now you've got a bunch of fucking coons across the joint, you know, and, that, you know, shit like that is dividing a lot of people and that, you know. So, yeah. It's kind of hard when you got it where, you know, a lot of people seem to believe that white people being friendly or friendlier or not in your face with racism, that it's not as racist. So a lot of people seem to be duped by that. But don't forget that white supremacy exists because, you know, they tend to keep blackfellas down and not as many of them with an education, because if we were educated about how these things work, we'd be trying to tear their throats. And that's why they keep us in this doldrum that we're in, you know, a lot of black and indigenous people across the world, you know. And yes, there is a huge difference between an indigenous and a constructed culture. You don't have a culture, where I do. I know my identity. I know my tribal culture and all that, you know. There's a huge fucking difference, you know. I know my ancestry. I know my tribal lands and boundaries. I know, you know, our customs and all that. I'm not going to fucking just go and give that up to get on code, you know, allegedly, you know, to fight off a fucking enemy. I mean, like, how does that work? I mean, yeah, we could diplomatically get along with other people, you know, in desperate times and all that. But how that's done, that has to be worked out. But you can't just fucking say, oh, just, you know, forget it all. And no, fuck you, man. You don't get to tell us that shit. No way. Never. We're not going to just drop it just because you come up with this idea. You've got to remember, you're coming from a point of view where white people subjugated you and just said you were black. That's your American experience as a displaced person. I can't stress that enough. You can't go and turn around and say to Africa, because that's where your bloodline comes from, and say, oh, just get rid of all this identity about Yoruba and Igbo and Hossa and Mande and Fulani and Ewe and all these other blackfellow tribes over there and nations and that over there. You can't just tell them to drop all of that. Why the fuck would they do that? For what? You don't even have that many white people there anymore. You know? So, yeah, you can't just fucking do that. And what are you expecting the blackfellas in Africa to do? You're expecting them to drop all of that for what? To tackle white supremacy? You know? Well, of course. But, you know, we're seeing that starting to happen in South Africa. You know? And we're starting to see that, you know, because I watched this documentary and that a lot of the Africans don't even really want the Chinese in certain places there. You know? Um, so, yeah. I just seem to think that you know you're coming across it too wrong and trying to say you're going to ignore it all and all this stuff. You can't try to say that everybody's just going to get on one page to do something like that because white people don't even like each other. They like that. They're not completely on code with each other, you know. But you know, because of the fact that you know they seem to think that it's better to you know in a certain circumstance that never really lasts that long, just come together to fend off a greater threat or whatever, then that's what they'll do. Okay, but you know, white fellas have always been at each other, so it's not as if you know they're completely got you know just dropped it all. No, they did it, bud. No, they fucking didn't. And no, they don't just do that. And no, not everybody else did, like the Chinese. No, 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 no. 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 Okay? In fact, a lot of people would say that, you know, your internal enemies are worse than your external enemies because your internal enemies know more about you than the external enemies. So let's not really go there with that. It's just the fact that, you know, under the white supremacist system with white privilege and all that, they'd just be like, okay, well, to get rich, you know, let's have a code through osmosis where everybody, you know, like now just wants to, you know, be a cheese rat and get money and all that. But, you know, white people still divided people. Look at them. You got different classes, different subcultures. They're not all united like that. You know, same with the Asian people and all that. Same with everybody, really. You know. And so, yeah, I don't agree with that part of it. You know. Yeah, you know. And, yeah, let me go back on this other point that I wanted to cover what you said. So, yeah, hang on. Where is it here? Covered a lot of these. Okay, maybe they're the last 2 points. All right, so if you've got a Pan-African nationalism, like Dr. Umar Johnson advocates for, you know, I don't know what your thought is on that versus the ADOS argument. You know, I don't know what your thought is on that. You know, maybe you might want to drop that. But yeah, I think that, you know, with Pan-Africanism, that seems to be pretty much something that mainly African Americans seem to believe in. Because Marcus Garvey was a Jamaican immigrant who pretty much started that whole thing. And, you know, then you had Bob Marley who was into it and all that. You know, where is it going? It's not really going anywhere. It's starting to die off. And so I don't know. Is that something that, you know, you believe in? I mean, if I gave you a choice to have 4 different options, would you stay in white America? Would you want to have an own African American country? Would you want to go back to Africa the way it is now with all these different European created countries like Nigeria and Cameroon and all these others? Or would you want to go back to an Africa that was pre-colonial where everybody had their tribe on their different lands and all that, having a tribal boundary and all that? Which would you choose? You know, maybe you might want to answer that. You know, because I know for a matter of fact, if I could choose to have an Indigenous Australian country, because we believe in having our own countries and all that, I'd live there. Even though our people are in a doldrum, I'd still live there because I'd believe in it. Because I'd get along with my own fucking people better than I would anybody else. You know? And white people believe in keeping other people oppressed, so you know what I mean? But anyway, I don't want to go off on that. But yeah, what else? this other point here. How does African American division, how is that better than tribal differences? How is that different? You know, blackfellas in the United States are divided. You know, you're divided on those things like colorism and religion and, you know, class and all kinds of things like that. You know, then being in a white person's individualistic culture, a lot of people, you know, tend to be like, oh, well, fuck that nigga, I want to be in... So, like, yeah. You know, don't try to say that you're a less divided people, because you are. You're very divided. And I'm not trying to, you know, throw comparatives or say who's saying who's better or who's right or whatever. I'm just saying the way you're approaching this is wrong. You don't come at Indigenous people and just tell us to just fucking drop our identities. Okay? What you can do is you can suggest, hey, you know, because think about it. Do white people just say they're white and they just drop German, drop French, drop Italian, drop Spanish and just all speak one language? Or just drop all of that and just say, oh, I'm just European, I'm just white? No, they don't. Do Asian people do the same fucking thing? No, they don't. So we're not going to just drop our fucking identity. That's a stupid idea. You can come with saying an idea, hey, let's just, for this sake, in this circumstance, come together and fend off the greater enemy and greater cause. I understand that. We can do that, and we do that generally. Like, think about it. We're a collective people, black people, where white people aren't. So there's a big difference with that. And white fellas tend to notice that shit. And, you know, we tend to be able to fucking, you know, like, yeah, you know, come together with those kind of things at hand, you know. But it's going to be a little bit, you know, a little bit more of a greater effort to be able to try and fight it off in that, you know, than just to say, oh, let's just get on code. I mean, what's the big idea? What do we need to do after we get on code? Then what? Because we're not all going to be on code. That's just never going to happen. Same with all white people. They're never always going to be all on code. I mean, think about it. They're fighting for their survival and that, but, you know, what's really causing their downfall is feminism and the gay agenda, because they're not having as many kids. Then you want to keep pointing out about it, you know, they want to have less kids so they can live a wealthy lifestyle. But it's coming back against them because all the immigrants, you know, tend to be replacing them in that. Yeah, I agree with that. So they're not all on code. So, yeah, I mean, what do we do then? You know, what is it then? What do we do then? So, you know... Now look, another thing is, if you want to air it, you know, don't keep making hour-long videos. Have a live stream. Captain Solo offered to have a live stream. Maybe you can get on there, and the three of us, and maybe somebody else can get on there, I don't know, and we could all talk it out. You know, because, you know, I just don't agree with you. Keep saying for Indigenous people to drop their cultures. Like I said, white people don't just drop their identities. Asian people just don't drop their identity. No one else just does that. You know? Even with a lot of them Islamic countries where they put Islam first and all that, they're still different from each other. And they still, you know, retain those identities to some degree. So, yeah, like, no, we're not going to do that. So, all right, well, yeah, I think I've said enough. So let's see if you respond to this one. But if you're going to, just get on a live stream, because I don't want to keep going back and forth, because we're just going to keep repeating the same thing. So, all right, I'll leave you to it.